Fire signs are not energy types, they are beginnings. They emerge at the point in the year where something must start, not continue. Where the cycle demands ignition, not maintenance. It enters the zodiac when being passive becomes death, because before it, nothing has begun, no direction exists, no claim has been made, but afterwards, form must stabilize, relationship must emerge, systems must organize. It exists at the threshold where action determines whether life even continues at all. Seasonally, fire corresponds to moments when impulse matters more than planning, speed determines survival, presence matters more than preparation, and will must override hesitation. Fire is the element of initiation, direction, assertion, heat, immediate presence. If earth grounds life, water feels it, and air circulates it. Fire starts it. And this is why they're born where they are. Each fire sign enters at a moment of rupture in the year. So for Aries, we have the spring equinox, and this is when dormancy ends and life must break through or it's going to die waiting. Leo's time is the midsummer time of the year, and this is when abundance peaks and identity must declare itself or it's going to be lost in the masses. And then late autumn is Sagittarius, and this is when resources are scarce and vision must extend beyond what's visible or hope collapses. These aren't gentle seasons, they're emergence points. Fire signs are born where waiting becomes fatal, doubt becomes paralysis, and being timid becomes extinction. See, fire signs, they have a shared nervous system of fire. They develop urgency, not because they're impatient, but because immediacy is required where they arrive in this cycle of life. They are shaped by environments where being hesitant costs life. Speed matters more than precision. Presence matters more than proof. And instinct must move before thought, which gives fire signs the characteristics of decisiveness, courage, being authentic, being direct. But it also gives them the burden of being very reckless, isolating. When others don't move at their pace, they get very exhausted from constant output, and they have a difficulty with nuance or delays. Fire was never meant to wait. It was meant to ignite. See, fire is an origin force. They exist to initiate between void and form, dormancy and emergence, doubt and direction, collective and individual. They ask, what needs to begin? Who's going to move first? Where is the opening? What happens if no one acts? See, without fire, earth never forms, water never flows, and air never circulates. Fire creates the first motion. I have a sentence I think anchors the entire element. I think it's the true core of fire signs. Fire signs are born where survival depends not on waiting or planning, but on the willingness to begin before certainty arrives. Just like a fate. They're not reckless because they don't think. They move because delay is the greater risk. Aries breaks the surface. Leo claims the center. Sagittarius extends the horizon. And together, fire signs form the ignition layer of the zodiac, the spark that allows the cycle to begin again. Aries. What it means to be born at the moment of rupture, and why this kind of creates an initiatory consciousness. So Aries enters at the spring equinox, the exact moment when light overtakes darkness. Not a gradual warming, not a gentle transition. This is the rupture. It is the point where dormancy ends, the moment life breaks the surface, the threshold where waiting becomes fatal, the split second when emergence is mandatory. See, Aries is born into the season where if you don't move now, you're going to die waiting. Because at Aries time, the earth is not ready. It's early spring. The ground is still frozen in places, it's unpredictable, it's unstable, it's dangerous for the hesitant. Yet, however, life emerges anyway. Seeds crack, they shoot, and they pass through the frozen soil. Animals wake before food is abundant. Mating begins before shelter is secure. This is the season where timing matters more than being ready. Timing matters more than readiness. Life that waits for perfect conditions, they don't survive early spring. life that moves, imperfect, vulnerable, and urgent, they do. And I think this is why Aries is the first sign. I don't think it's arbitrary. Because the zodiac doesn't begin with stability, it begins with initiation. Before Aries, think about it, there's only potential. Energy is dormant. Nothing is claimed form. Afterwards, direction exists. Identity begins. The cycle has momentum. Aries is the moment when nothingness becomes somethingness. Potential becomes kinetic. The year says I am for the first time, and that's why they govern the head, the face, first impressions, immediate action, self-assertion. They are literally the first encounter with life force itself. There's a psychological imprint, however, of being born at breakthrough. Aries children internalize the season as a nervous system baseline. Deep down, they have this assumption that life becomes immediate and requires immediate action, and that if you hesitate, that's dangerous, and that the world rewards those who move first, and that identity must be claimed, not given. So early on, Aries learns to trust their impulse, to move before thinking, to assert before acting. They begin without having permission. They don't ask if it's safe first, they ask what happens if I go now. And there's a reason why Aries feels urgency as a baseline state. Because early spring carries a biological truth that the window's small, right? In early spring, weather is unstable, resources are scarce, competition is fierce. Those who wait lose territory, they're gonna lose mate, they're gonna lose food. So Aries inherits this as I must act before the moment closes. And that's why they interrupt, they start things immediately, they get impatient with processes, and they feel restless when movement stops. It's not aggression, it's survival instinct encoded as tempo. And see, this is why Aries consciousness is singular, not collective, unlike Aquarius. In early spring, survival is individual before it's communal. The seed breaks alone, the birds are going to migrate alone, the animal's going to wake up alone. There's no group consensus or shared decision making or collective coordination. There's only either I emerge or I don't, which ends up creating this self-focus as a default, right? Like a discomfort with dependency, an impatience with others' hesitation, a sense of isolation, even in connection. Aries is not selfish. They are alone at the threshold. In a way, later signs are just not. And this is why Aries struggles with consequences, because early spring rewards speed, not foresight. The organism that stops to consider, they're going to lose their mate, they're going to miss the window, they're going to get overtaken. So we see Aries develop being traits of action before analyzing, momentum over strategy, instinct over planning, which creates adults who start things very brilliantly, but they struggle to sustain them, and they move on when the momentum fades, and they'll regret impulsively, but they won't stop acting impulsively, because in their bones they know that the cost of waiting is always higher than the cost of moving. And there's also this burden of being first for them. And this is what Aries carries that others don't see. They never get to follow. Later, signs enter a world that already has, like for Taurus, onward form. For Gemini, onward relationship. For Sagittarius, onward meaning. Aries enters nothing. And from there, they must create from the void and assert without reference and move without model and lead without even knowing where, which is why they feel lonely even when they're surrounded. They burn out from constant initiation. They struggle when asked to just maintain, and they leave when things stabilize. Aries isn't commitment phobic. They're built for beginnings, not middles. Which brings the shadow of Aries season. Every season extracts a cost. So Aries shadow is their recklessness that gets disguised as courage, their isolation that gets disguised as independence, this exhaustion from constant output, the inability to rest without feeling obsolete, and anger when momentum is blocked. Because your job is to break through. Anything that slows you feels like death, which brings the evolutionary task of Aries. Aries growth, it comes the moment that they realize that not every moment is the threshold. Seasonally, this is the transition that they must make from constant initiation to knowing when others, and to when to let others carry what they started. A mature Aries will see them having a spark that lights the fire, then knows how to step back. Someone who begins things and trusts a cycle to complete them. A leader who moves fast but doesn't demand that others keep their pace. And when that happens, Aries stops burning out alone and becomes the force that shows us all how to start. Aries' place in the Zodiac story is the initial point of the entire cycle. Because without Aries, nothing begins. Energy stays dormant. The year never starts. If Aries fails, life misses the window and momentum never builds, and the cycle collapses before it even forms. Because Aries is not here to finish. They are here to make sure there's something to even finish at all. And I think I have a sentence for Aries that lives in their bones, the deep seasonal truth of them. That Aries was born at the moment when waiting means death. So they learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear delay emergence. And this is not impulsivity. That's the nervous system of spring itself. Aries did not come into the world to be patient. They came to initiate, break through, assert, begin. They're not reckless. They are the first motion after stillness, because without Aries, nothing starts, nothing moves, nothing claims its right to exist. They are the crack in the frozen ground, the split in the sea, the first breath of the year, the rupture that makes all other life possible. Then we get to Leo, our next fire sign. Leo shows us what it means to be born at the peak of radiance and why that creates solar consciousness. So Leo enters in at high summer, the moment of maximum solar power. This is not the beginning of warmth. This is not gentle growth. This is the peak. It is the point when the sun reaches maximum strength, the moment when life is most visible, the threshold where expression becomes survival, the apex before the inevitable decline. Leo is born into a season where if you don't claim your place now, the moment passes forever. So at Leo time, the earth is at its maximum output. The world is fully illuminated and it's abundant, but competitive. It's hot to the point of stress. It's demanding constant energy expenditure. And this is the time where fruit ripens and it must be noticed, and animals, they're going to establish dominance hierarchies, and territories either going to be lost or claimed, and visibility is going to determine the survival. Because the ripest fruit gets eaten first, and then it spreads its seeds. The brightest flower gets pollinated. The most visible animal gets the mate. This is the season where radiance is a survival strategy. Life that hides in high summer, it does not reproduce. But life that shines, yeah, it does. And this is why Leo governs expression, not just ego. Because the Zodiac reaches Leo at the only point where growth is complete and energy is maximum and visibility is mandatory and time is limited. Before Leo, life is emerging, stabilizing, connecting. That's Aries through Cancer. After Leo, Virgo through Pisces, life must organize, distribute, and survive scarceness. Leo is the moment when the self must be fully expressed, or it won't exist in the collective memory. When identity becomes undeniable and presence must be claimed, which is why we see Leo govern the heart, the spine, creative output, performance, leadership, and children. The heart is like our central pump, the spine is the axis of the body, and children are the ultimate expression of self into future. They're literally born at the moment when life says, look at what I made. And there is a psychological imprint of being born at the apex, because Leo children internalize the season as a nervous system baseline. Deep down for them, there's an assumption that life requires being seen, that invisibility equals non-existence, that warmth and attention are as necessary as food. And before the periphery gets forgotten, that the center is the safest place. So early on, Leo's going to understand to command attention, to create from the center outward, to trust in their own radiance, to feel diminished when ignored. They don't ask, am I allowed to shine? They ask, what happens if I don't? And that's kind of why Leo feels the need to be central, because high summer carries a biological truth, that the window of peak vitality is brief. So, a Leo season, the sun is already beginning its descent. Fruit that doesn't ripen now is never going to ripen. Energy that isn't expressed now will never peak again. Dominance that's established now determines survival through winter. So Leo inherits this as I must be seen now or I'm going to be forgotten, which is why they create boldly and they need to be recognized and they feel hurt when they're overlooked and they struggle with being peripheral. They're not being vain. It's the urgency of the ripening moment for them. And this is why Leo consciousness is generative. It's not reflective. In high summer, you got no time for self-doubt, revision, hiding, waiting for permission. Because the fruit, it has to ripen. The flower, it has to bloom. The lion, it has to roar. There's only I create, therefore I am, which creates pride as a structural necessity, and confidence as a survival mechanism, and creation as identity, and then generous as an overflow, because there is overflow at the peak. Leo's not arrogant. They're living at the season when self-certainty determines reproductive success. And that's why Leo struggles with decline and irrelevance, because high summer is the only season that just cannot be sustained, right? Because the sun's going to descend, the heat's going to fade, the fruit will rot if not picked, the moment's going to pass. So Leo develops this fear of fading and this resistance to being replaced and this difficulty like yielding the center and this panic when attention withdraws, which creates adults who overperform to stay relevant, and they're going to feel threatened by other success, and they're going to struggle to age gracefully, and they're going to equate their visibility with worth, because in their bones they know when the light leaves, what the heck is going to remain of me? And that's just the burden being the sun. Because here's what Leo carries that others don't see, that they must generate their own heat. Later signs, they can reflect, which is Virgo, they can have balance, which is Libra, they can transform, which is Scorpio, but Leo must radiate constantly, or they feel like they failed. They must be the source, not the recipient. They must give warmth, even when depleted. They like hold the center, even when they're just tired, and they maintain brightness, even when inside they're dimming, which is why they burn out, but they hide it. They feel lonely at the center. They give endlessly, but they struggle to receive, and they collapse when no one's watching. Leo isn't needy. They're built to be the sun, which is always giving and never filled. And this is the shadow of Leo season, because every season extracts a cost. For Leo, it's them having like their arrogance and masking their fragility and how frail they are inside, and their generosity, it kind of like demands to be recognized, and their creativity, it serves the ego, not necessarily the work. And they do have rage when they're outshined, and they have this inability to share the stage, because when your job is to be the brightest thing in the sky, anyone else's light is just kind of going to feel like erasure. The evolutionary task of Leo is for their growth when they realize that radiance does not require constant performance. Seasonally, this is a transition that they must make from needing to be the sun to knowing they can be warm without being the center. We're going to see a mature Leo become someone who celebrates others' light without diminishment, a creator who makes beauty for their own sake, a leader who shares power in generous ways, a heart that radiates even in stillness. When that happens, Leo stops performing to survive, and it becomes the warmth that remains even after summer ends. See, Leo's place in the Zodiac story is that Leo is the creative apex of the entire cycle. Without Leo, nothing claims its fullness. Beauty remains unexpressed. Joy stays muted. Life forgets to celebrate itself. If Leo fails, the cycle has no peak. Identity never solidifies. Nothing is ever remembered. And the heart of the year, it just goes dark. See, Leo's not here to be modest. They're here to show us what life looks like at full radiance. Leo was born at the moment when the sun reaches maximum power. So they learned that existence requires not just being alive, but being undeniably, radiantly, unforgettably present. That's not narcissism. That's the nervous system of high summer itself. Leo did not come in the world to fade into the background. They came to create, lead, shine, radiate. They're not attention seeking. They are the attention themselves, okay? the light that makes everything visible, because without them, nothing claims the center, nothing ripens fully, nothing dares to be magnificent. They are the sun at its apex, the fruit at peak sweetness, the roar that announces presence, the radiance that proves life is worth celebrating. Then we get to Sagittarius, and they show us what it means to be born at the edge of scarcity and why that creates visionary consciousness. So, where Sagittarius is up in the year is at late autumn, after the harvest is completely gone and before winter has fully settled. It's not abundance, it's not safety, it's more of the threshold of scarcity. It's the moment when stored resources are visible and finite, and the moment when you know exactly what you have left, and the season when survival depends on what you cannot see, and the time when hope must be constructed, not just assumed. See, Sagittarius is born into the season where when what's here is not enough, so you must believe in what's beyond. At Sagittarius time, the earth has nothing left to give, right? The landscape is barren. This is what late autumn is actually doing. It's barren, it's cold, but not yet frozen. It's stripped of obvious resources. It's demanding movement, not settlement. This is a season where animals that migrate, they gotta leave. Hunters, they have to go out further. Tribes, they have to rely on memory of distance abundance. And survival depends on knowing what exists beyond the visible horizon. Life that stays where it is starves. Life that moves toward what it cannot see yet survives. This is a season where vision becomes a survival tool. And this is why Sagittarius governs vision, belief, and distance. Late autumn, it teaches you a brutal lesson that the present location not going to sustain you. So consciousness must develop the ability to imagine what's beyond and the capacity to hold hope when conditions are harsh, and the willingness to move toward the unseen, and the faith that somewhere else has what here does not, which is why Sagittarius governs long distance travel, philosophy and belief systems, higher education and meaning making, foreign lands and cultures that should govern the thighs, the muscles that's going to carry you far. They're literally born into the season where seeing further means surviving longer. And there is a psychological imprint of being born at the edge. Sagittarius children internalize the season as nervous system baseline. So deep down, they have this assumption that if they stay still, it's going to be dangerous, that the answer is not here, that meaning must be actively sought, that optimism is not naive, it's necessary. So early on, Sagittarius learns to look beyond their immediate circumstances and to believe in what they haven't yet experienced, and to move when others settle, and to search for meaning when others accept limitation. They don't ask, is this enough? They ask, what's out there that I haven't found yet? And Sagittarius, they feel restlessness as a baseline state. Late autumn, it carries this biological imperative, right? That the window for movement is closing. And late autumn, winter is deteriorating. Daylight is shrinking. Food resources are exhausted. Those who don't move before winter are going to get trapped. So Sagittarius inherits this as, I must keep moving or I'll be caught in the wrong place when it's too late. And this is why they leave before things end. They get bored when life becomes predictable. They panic in confined spaces. They crave new horizons constantly. It's not commitment phobia. It's migration instinct encoded as consciousness. And this is why Sagittarius needs meaning. It's not just philosophical like luxury. I don't think I said that word right, but I'm wrong. In late autumn, physical survival alone is just not enough. The body can endure cold, but the psyche needs a reason to keep going when conditions are this harsh. This is why humans historically create stories to explain suffering, and they develop belief systems to maintain hope, and they build philosophies to frame hardship as purposeful, and they invent gods who promise spring would return. Because Sagittarius is born in the moment when, without meaning, the will to survive collapses. This creates adults who cannot tolerate meaningless repetition, and they need to understand the why behind everything. And they become depressed when life feels purposeless, and they seek truth even when that truth is uncomfortable. Meaning for Sagittarius is not optional. It's a psychological resource that keeps them moving when physical resources are gone. And Sagittarius consciousness is expansive, not detailed. See, late autumn, it rewards big picture thinking over precision, direction over exactness, faith over proof, vision over analysis. The organism that stops to examine every detail is going to miss that migration window. They're going to waste energy on irrelevant information, and they're going to get lost in what doesn't matter. So, Sagittarius, it develops broad vision and recognizing patterns across distance and intuitive leaps and impatient with a lot of things, which creates adults who see the forest but not the trees. They'll trust instinct over data. They'll get frustrated with bureaucracy and detail work, and they'll inspire with vision, but they're going to struggle with execution because in their bone they know the one who sees furthest survives, not the one who counts most carefully. And their burden is kind of seeing what others don't yet, because Sagittarius creates and carries that they live in the future while everyone is still in the present. Late autumn consciousness is always oriented towards what's coming, what's possible, and what's beyond, which means they feel out of sync with people focused on now. They struggle to appreciate what is. They're called unrealistic when they're actually just further ahead, and they feel lonely in their optimism because they're not naive. They're seasonally required to believe in spring when winter hasn't even started yet. And there's a reason why Sagittarius tells the truth even when it hurts. Because in late autumn, false information is just fatal. If the scout says that there's water when there isn't, the tribe moves in the wrong direction. Energy's wasted. People literally die. So Sagittarius develops this blunt honesty and this intolerance for being deceived and this direct communication and this impatient with social niceties that obscure the truth, which ends up creating adults who will say what others won't and who will offend without meaning to and who will value authenticity over diplomacy and cannot maintain pretense. Because when survival depends on accurate information about distant resources, polite lies become more dangerous than harsh truths. Now, every season has a cost. The shadow of Sagittarius season is that they have this chronic dissatisfaction with the present. They have an inability to commit to what is. They have a restlessness that's going to prevent depth. Their optimism that denies real limitation, and this loneliness from always moving on. Because when your job is to see beyond, staying still feels like dying. Now, the evolutionary task of Sagittarius is that Sagittarius growth comes when they realize that the horizon is not the only sacred thing. So is the ground beneath your feet. Because seasonally, this is the transition they must make from constant seeking to finding meaning and presence without losing vision. Mature Sagittarius becomes the one who expands others without abandoning them, a teacher who inspires without leaving, a visionary who also builds. When that happens, Sagittarius stops running from limitation and becomes the one who shows us how to hope without escaping. See, Sagittarius' place in the Zodiac story is that they are the meaning keepers. Before Sagittarius, power has been confronted, Scorpio. After Sagittarius, structure must be built, Capricorn. Without Sagittarius, the cycle loses purpose, scarcity destroys morale, vision collapses into despair. If Sagittarius falls or fails, we forget why we're surviving. Hope dies before the winter even starts, and the tribe gives up. Sagittarius is not here to settle. They are here to make sure we remember what we're surviving for. See, Sagittarius is born at the moment when the present offers nothing. So they learned that faith in the unseen is not delusion. It is the only thing that carries life through scarcity. That's not escapism. That's consciousness required to survive late autumn. See, Sagittarius did not come into the world to stay still. They came to see further, believe bigger, move beyond, inspire hope. They're not unrealistic. They are the part of us that refuses to accept that what's here is all there is. Without Sagittarius, we would settle too early. We would accept limitation as truth. We would forget that there's more. They're the archer's arrow, right? They're the horizon of promise. They're the belief that somewhere beyond here, there is enough. And the vision that keeps the cycle from collapsing into despair. Fire is the spark that keeps the cycle moving. Fire does not nurture the world, does not organize it, it does not think it into clarity. Fire makes sure the world does not stop. Across the year, fire appears only when the system reaches a point where hesitation becomes fatal. There are moments when life must act, not wait. When momentum has to override doubt, override caution, override the weight of what has already been. Aries ensures the system breaks free and begins. Leo ensures the system expresses itself fully at peak. Sagittarius ensures that the system moves beyond what is toward what could be. Together, they form a single function: initiation under pressure. Fire does not ask us to plan more. It asks us to move before we're ready, before the path is clear, before permission is granted, before fear subsides, before everything is certain. Fire intervenes when inertia takes hold and potential remains dormant and visibility fades and the future feels impossible. Survival requires what hasn't been done before. Its message is always the same. If action does not occur, the moment dies. And there is the cost of ignoring fire, because when fire is suppressed, Aries turns to rage or paralysis. Leo dims into depression or desperate performance. Sagittarius collapses into being cynical or reckless escape, and systems become stagnant, lifeless, overcautious, bound by precedent, unable to respond to crisis, and slowly extinguishing. This is not because fire is reckless, it is because fire is the first thing lost when safety becomes more important than aliveness. And there's the maturity of fire. Mature fire is not constant burning. It is purposefully knowing when to initiate or to ignite. It knows when to strike and when to conserve, when to lead and when to pass the torch, when to radiate and when to let others shine, when to believe and when to verify, when to inspire and when to build. Integrated fire does not consume everything. It moves through life, lighting what needs to begin, maintaining what needs to endure, and guiding what needs to transcend. Fire exists so that nothing stays frozen in place forever. It's not destructive, it's not impulsive, it's not selfish. It is the heat that makes transformation possible. Without fire, life may exist, but it does not become. And without becoming, even the most stable systems eventually die. Fire is not the structure. Fire is what makes sure the structure can change.